Look at something that's new and make yourself known as the one firm that only does social media marketing for that one niche. Get your first clients, do it for free, but then you have what Harvard calls a case study, and they'll line up around the block. And when you have more customers than you have time for, you charge more. And that's how he went from, nothing to, spoiler alert, if you read Future Proofing, in under a year to make $1 million profit.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Jay Samit with us, international best-selling author. Jay is a dynamic entrepreneur and intrapreneur who is widely recognized as one of the world's leading experts on disruption and innovation. Described by Wired Magazine as having the coolest job in the industry, Jay is chairman of one of the leading AI companies, which is focused on creating artificial general intelligence. Jay has held positions as a NASDAQ company CEO, as well as global executive roles with Universal Studios, EMI, Sony, and most recently was the independent vice chairman at Deloitte. Samit's technology columns have been published in Harvard Business Review, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal, and his book, Disrupt You, is currently published in 10 languages. Jay, it's so great to have you on the show.
Good talking to you again.
Yeah, so you were a guest on Get Yourself Optimized on my other show, and I loved what we talked about, and I just had to have you on this show and have something that was really targeted to marketers and to the marketing world. So thank you for doing this.
Sure, happy to do it.
All right, so let's talk about how AI is not something to be feared, but something to be used as a opportunity to innovate and reinvent yourself, your career, your business, your market.
Well, let me challenge the question.
Okay.
Half of you listeners will lose your job in the next year.
Okay.
AI will replace most marketing jobs, most middle management. But it's very similar to when Reid Hoffman and I launched LinkedIn. Okay. At first, all the headhunters go, this is the greatest tool because we can find people easier to do everything. And then one day they wake up and the tool has replaced their industry. So there are still some headhunters, very niche, that offer specific things that the generalist can't get. And that's the lesson here, is you can quickly embrace this tool and compete with a firm that has 20 or 50 people. But at the same time, you'll see that departments that had all those people will migrate onto using AI and have less and less people involved, getting greater ROI on the investment dollar. So you really have to reinvent yourself. And I've been preaching this forever. When Disrupt You came out a decade ago, I said half of all jobs will disappear by the end of this decade. When I spoke at Davos exactly a year ago this week, the head of the World Monetary Fund spoke before I did and said 40% of all jobs will disappear globally in the next 2 years. That's a banker saying that. That's not a crazy entrepreneur. But what I want to get across to your audience, and what has been, my ethos from the beginning, is disruption isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to what happens to you. So These tools suddenly give you superpowers. They give you the ability to do things that you could never imagine before. They're not flawless. There's a lot of things that they don't do. But in marketing, they're really, really good because today's large language models do not think, they do not solve, they look for patterns. So anything that doesn't need an absolute answer, like 2 + 2, they're really good at. So, looking at mammograms, a doctor's seen 10,000, they've seen 100 million. They can see the associate patterns and see breast cancer 10 years before a human will see it. The same is on marketing. There will be insights that they'll be able to get. And there's only one in the case of marketing. There's only one advantage that you can have in the 21st century, and that is to get insights from your data faster than the competition. And that's what the game's about. So we have a lot of bad data. We have a lot of useless data. So figuring out what to input, what to look, and where to find the difference. And also remember that most of us still live in an analog world. And so there are other ways that can be just as effective. And I'll give you, an ancient one from an old guy with white hair. But when we launched eBay, we knew there were crazy collectors that collected stuff in the early days, but how do you reach them? The average person on the internet was in their 20s. Collectors were in their 40s and 50s. No one could figure out anything. Make a long story short, we rented a bunch of school buses in one summer, took them to every single swap meet around the country with signs on them, free ice cream from Baskin Robbins. And you went on, and there was somebody sitting in a terminal. What are you collecting? They went on to eBay. Is this the thing? They go, yeah, how do I get that? And we signed people up. And suddenly it exploded. All of the major platforms, the billion-dollar companies that I've been involved in the launching of, all figured out how to do some type of marketing outside of the digital world. Inside the digital world, you also have to remember to get partners. And I talk about this a lot. And these tools will help you make a better case for your partner. I don't care what you're marketing, what you're selling, what your product is. There is a big, giant company that's not a competitor that also wants the same people, right? If you're marketing orthopedic shoes for old people, there's somebody that wants to sell them insurance, So figure out who that giant company is, and then figure out how what you're doing can deliver them customers more effectively than they're doing. Not to hire them as a customer, but for you to use their money, OPM, other people's money, to then go and get your product out there. So I had the unfortunate task of, when Sony was falling behind Apple and the iPod, of how do they play catch up. I had no budget. Apple was spending $100 million a year advertising iTunes, and I had to launch a competitor. So I looked at who was in trouble, who was open to a new idea. Because if you're doing great, you don't want to hear from me. And McDonald's was having their worst year ever. First time sales went down. United Airlines was in bankruptcy. And I went to both of them, and I went to McDonald's and said, I can make you cool again. And make a long story short, they spent their millions and millions of marketing dollars to run an international campaign, buy a Big Mac, get a free track. So on every Big Mac box, there's a code. You go to our store, you sign up at the store, and you get your free track. They delivered 20 million paying customers our first week in business. Nobody has the marketing budget of the McDonald's. Nobody has the reach of McDonald's. We were on every tray liner, every bag, every commercial, every window. And on United, got Sheryl Crow to do a concert in the sky, the first time it's ever been done, from Chicago to LA. And we filled the plane with press. And it was to show that you could use your sky miles for other things like music. And now every person on every United flight for a month saw that concert. So the end result is the two of those things that delivered me millions and millions of paying customers was done on a budget of $0. Now, you then have to go and use your tools to keep the customers and keep marketing and find all the things that we know how to do with SEO and other tools. But it's really about leveraging someone else's strength. And so right now, there's a lot of big brands in big trouble because they're not as nimble. They're not as quick as adapting to how to use a new tool. And they're like deer in the headlights. So if you can come up with that solution, you'll be embraced and you'll get to spend their money to help your cause.
Yeah. So what would be an example for somebody who's maybe running a marketing agency and or some consultancy, and they, in the business to business world, they're selling B2B solutions. So who would they partner with and use OPM or no budget in order to create a lot of interest in their offering?
So the key is not to be buying the same words and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. Where can you reach your audience that is a different place than everybody else is reaching them? How can you then do it more effectively? And I'll give you the example that comes to mind. When was the last time you saw a Rolls-Royce TV commercial?
Never. Yeah.
Okay. You ever go to any of the big auto shows, Detroit, LA, anywhere? You ever see a Rolls-Royce booth? No. You know where Rolls-Royce spends their marketing dollars? They show up at places that sell jets. So the shows that show off the new jets. Because if you're sitting there, do I buy, the $60 million jet or the $100 million jet? It's a rounding error to pick up a car while you're there. Same audience, but there's no other cars that you're competing against. So it's that way of looking at things. Where can you go differently? Subaru famously did this when, as a small car company, they couldn't compete against the big guys for the NFL or this, that, or the other thing. And they noticed in looking at their buyers that they had a large following in the lesbian community. So they moved their marketing dollars. They moved the subtle messages in their ads, right? They moved who they were hiring to be in the ads that may be known to one audience, but just look like, a model in an ad for another audience. And their sales exploded. So today, again, you have to find that insight that separates what your client or your market is going for. Because everybody else that can spend money can always outspend you. And that's where, from a marketing standpoint, I started my own company in the beginning. I had one of the startups I did in this space. Was acquired by a News Corp, Fox, for $200 million after 18 months. Because we showed how to do something that they hadn't figured out how to do. And in my second book, Future Proofing You, I took a homeless immigrant, mentored him one day a week for a year, and he went from homeless to self-made millionaire. And he did that by starting a marketing company. And it's the same message. He wanted to do social media marketing. And I'm like, Coca-Cola isn't going to hire a kid on the street to do their marketing. So I said, look at what everybody's talking about. Look at something that's new and make yourself known as the one firm that only does social media marketing for that one niche. Get your first clients, do it for free, but then you have what Harvard calls a case study, and they'll line up around the block. And when you have more customers than you have time for, you charge more. And that's how he went from, nothing to, spoiler alert, if you read Future Proofing, in under a year to make $1 million profit.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I think I know who you're talking about too. Yeah. He was actually a guest years ago on this podcast. Yeah, talking about growth hacking.
So people don't think that there's some get rich quick. My rules were quite simple. Daytime is for making sales calls, nighttime's for doing the work, and no TV, dating, or any fun for 12 months. But he was willing to work harder than most people do in order to spend the rest of his life living better than most people will. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a fair trade. And that's the message here. Markets are going to be decimated. Big, giant companies are continued to disappear. That means billions of dollars are in flux and moving, which is opportunity. If everything was done the same way, the same guys would be on the top, and there'd be no point to life. So it's a great time if you're willing to go for it. And never have the tools been cheaper, never has access to capital been easier. And post-pandemic, the need to actually be in the high-rent city or in a first world country, you can run your business from anywhere in the world using talent that's just as bright and maybe less costly, or have a better work-life balance. I'm on the board of a company where our CFO decided to live in Costa Rica. Smart. There's Google engineers that no longer say, why should I share an apartment with 3 other dudes in Silicon Valley when I can get my own place a block from the beach in Hawaii and do the same work and get to surf every day? So
it's great. And what are some of these daily habits of the people that you find to be not just resilient, but the real future-proofed type of folks that you write about?
So in my book, I read about the 12 truths that you have to live and embrace, but it starts out with having a positive mindset. Literally, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So why not start with the you think you can? And when you start off, and if you literally start off every morning in the mirror, today will be better than yesterday, and I have the power to make it so. And you say that to yourself, this may sound like some hippy dippy stuff, but your brain listens to what you're saying. It doesn't know truth from reality. Reality is what it's processing. So it lights up your synaptic nerves, okay? Releases the oxytocin. And what that does is makes you happier, makes you complete more sales, more likable, better love life. People want to be around you. It changes everything. From there, from that very simple step, the next thing is, what are you going to accomplish today? If you go into your day and let the day swallow up all your time, everybody has the same 24 hours. So those emails will come in and that interesting meme will come in and you'll waste away your whole day. But if there's 5 things that are on the list that have to get done today, you do them in the order of priority and you don't do anything else until you've done those 5 things. And at night you review your list and you make your next list. And those people that have daily lists exceed better. Now, the other thing, and my books show all the research behind so that you don't have to think it's some, lunatic. Higher IQ doesn't translate to wealth. Going to better schools doesn't translate to wealth. The only precondition that translates to wealth is being a member of the Lucky Sperm Club and being born into it, okay? So if you're not the billionaire's son, don't focus on that. And by the way, within 2 generations, most of the time that money gets squandered. But there are more self-made millionaires, and there is a self-made billionaire every 32 hours. So I don't know what you did this past weekend, Stephan, but you're a slacker. So I look around, and the self-made billionaires are getting younger and younger. Kylie Jenner, one of the Kardashians, self-made billionaire, that's with a B, at 21. And you go, well, she's a Kardashian. There were no other billionaires in the family. So what did she do differently? And what could you have done? And how do you leverage that same thing?
Yeah. And that message that you gave earlier about getting partners, boy, did she do that in spades.
OPM money. Yeah. I mean, the big break, the big decision that she made that was appropriate for her generation that seemed obvious, but every other generation before didn't, is when you go back to Elizabeth Taylor or anybody, the cosmetic companies, the perfume companies would go, we'll pay you a big fat check to license your name. Why are they doing that? Because they believe your name can make them more money than what they're paying you. So when the cosmetic companies came to Kylie, she said, why not just figure out where they get their cosmetics? They don't make them. There's only 2 factories on the planet that make lipstick. So all those hundreds of brands are 2 factories. Why don't I just have my own line? And that's the difference. Instead of getting 2 cents a product, you get all the profit of the product. Mr. Beast, if people don't know who that is, the #1 most viewed person on YouTube. If you aren't watching and aren't following, then you're not understanding YouTube as a marketing platform. Okay? Guy makes $500 million. What is he doing that no one else figured out how to do? And what he figured out how to do is really look at every interaction, look at the insights from the data, and optimize for it until he figured out a perfect formula for making some of the most engaging content. And now he's expanded beyond that. Amazon came with a big old check and said, how big of a check do we have to give you to make a show for Prime? And his show is killing it. So all these opportunities are open to everybody. There's no gatekeeper blocking you. And as trite as it says, the one difference between my two books that I realized from mentoring Vin that I didn't cover in the first book is you can't go this alone. You will need a series of mentors in your life. Because the time it takes for you to be an expert in each aspect of things is wasted time when there's somebody willing to share that expertise that wants to validate their existence by helping you move forward. And everybody that I've met, whether they're in sports or entertainment or business, all will tell you that the sole difference in their life was a mentor.
So are you getting mentoring from somebody now?
I'm no longer trying to accomplish anything. I'm on the other side of this game. I'm not here to sell anything. I don't sell courses. I don't sell, I'm trying to pay it forward. I spent 10 years teaching this at the largest engineering school in the US. I got paid $15 a class and it cost me $16 to park. My best semester, I had a team of students do $100 million in a semester. Now, my biggest problem with the university was most of my students that were doing well dropped out, and the university wasn't making their $50,000 a year off of these kids. And I said, yeah, but I'm sure they're going to endow the university, right? But then I started writing the book because I thought I could scale how to pay it forward. And the biggest shock of writing the book, and probably the most rewarding thing of my career, is I wrote it thinking about the US, right? Yes, I've held global jobs, but I know the US market. And I didn't realize that the same principles work all over the globe and people are thirsting for it. And I've heard from readers in 140 countries. And I could be having the worst day and I get an email that I call a love letter of somebody telling me that the book changed their life. It didn't. They changed their life. I just gave them a little push where they needed it. And so this is my mission. How we have problems. Entrepreneurs solve problems. So unless we teach people how to be entrepreneurs, and the key of any entrepreneur is marketing. Unless you can build a market, it doesn't matter how good your idea is. No one comes to you because you have the better mousetrap. Matter of fact, my whole career has shown me that the better mousetrap doesn't necessarily win the market or sell the best. It's the one with the most clever, cost-effective way of scaling quickly. Reid Hoffman talks a lot about blitz scaling, that moment when you go really big. Coming from a Hollywood-centric background, for me it was always, what's the best star that I can go and attach to this thing and use them to reach a global audience? How can you do that? And, you take, 50 cent of vitamin water, right? They offered him some money. He said, no, I'll just take stock instead. And his whole net worth, his vitamin water became $1 billion company off of the back of him marketing it. So you're seeing a lot of new ways to reach stuff. And you're now going to see with AI, virtual celebrities. I don't mean copies of existing celebrities. The number one TV star in China right now is not a human being. It's a soap opera where the lead is gorgeous, but she's not real. The number one influencer in Pakistan, right, is a gorgeous gal. She's not human. So the era of having to deal with celebrities that can get in trouble, get arrested, get drunk, do whatever, and you can now own and contain them. I mean, Walt Disney once said he had an advantage over the other studios. If an actor was acting up, he could just rip them up. You can now create something with AI that can be proprietary and be a spokesperson that, gets a huge social media following. Then your cost of customer acquisition goes to zero.
Do you know anyone personally who's creating virtual celebrities? Yeah. Can you share any stories?
No. I gave the ones that are out there. But I will tell you one that just went wrong, because the one thing that you can never take for granted is trust. Don't do anything squirrely, because once a brand loses the trust of their audience, it cannot be gained back. So if you're Meta, Facebook, everybody that could possibly use your platforms is already on your platforms. So the only way to make more profits is to get higher engagement, okay? And they've optimized algorithms and done everything. And somebody there looked at AI and said, wait a second, we can make a whole bunch of fake people, not to cheat the advertisers, but to interact with live people, make the live people think that they've built a friendship, spend more time on the platform engaging. And so they created this one woman, African American, who described herself as a queer mama, right? So she was gay or bisexual and had kids and whatever, this whole story. And she interacted with people. And what they didn't tell any people that she was interacting with was it was created by 10 guys, 9 white guys and an Asian guy. And so the whole thing is now blown up in their faces, basically digital blackface. They were making up fake minorities, fake different, to go after different audiences to get them to engage more. Horrible.
I hadn't heard that one. Yeah, that is horrible.
Yeah. The other one that was the same premise, but done in a way that I would have given them an award because it was so clever, is how does Spotify make more money? Everybody that's going to use Spotify is already on the platform. Okay? Everybody's listening as many hours as they have time to listen, so you're not going to get more engagement. So the only way to make more money would be to reduce costs. And I come from the music business. It doesn't matter whether you're listening to the Beatles, Korn, AC/DC, you're paying the same royalty per song. But what if our algorithm knows what you like and what you listen to, and we use AI to make up songs that sound like something that you'd like and mix them into your playlist? Because those songs we pay 0 royalties on. And for a huge chunk of the Spotify audience, 15% of what they're listening to is this made up stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah. So there's always people using things in ways that don't seem obvious. I mean, my entire career is no one ever hired Jay Samit because they were having a good year. They turned over all the cards. We've tried everything. Let's give this lunatic a shot. And that's how I ended up running these giant companies, not because they had the answer, but because they were kicked enough to say, we're willing to try anything. And the results, I quadrupled the stock of a major international company that's been around for years and years because of this approach to things. And at the end of the day, these tools give you superpowers. They let you A/B test faster. They let you scale. They let you interact. But they're not without their flaws. So you really have to understand what they can do. Now, today's AI is as dumb as AI will ever be. Large language models will go the way of the Model T, and you'll see new ways of dealing with artificial intelligence, such as what Versus does, changing it, both reducing the energy consumption and the cost of running these large models is unsustainable.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these other models and what's coming down the pike, AGI, and you mentioned Versus and so forth. Let's prognosticate a bit for our listener who's not up to speed with all that stuff.
So I don't want to go deep dive in the science because you'll lose your entire audience very quickly. But the chief scientist at Versus, a guy named Carl Friston, a genius, went to the same school in London that the geniuses that run the AI at OpenAI and at Meta and everything. They all came out of the same professor, all one school of thought, and they all went down one path. And Carl went, I don't think LLMs work. What if we use cognitive science, look at how animals learn, how plants learn, how do things actually learn, as opposed to let's take a big pile of stuff, dump it in here, and look for associations. And so it's called active inference. And so now you can teach things to learn, and they actually learn. AI doesn't learn. AI only knows what you put in the bucket. So as we start using things that learn, they will learn things that mankind hasn't already learned. And that's when the hockey stick goes up on innovation and change. And if some AI figures out an orthogonal way to predict the stock market, you'll wake up tomorrow and one entity will own everything. I mean, it's that size of a race right now. And so the same thing can be done with sales and marketing and supply chain. I mean, supply chain was always relegated to people that you didn't invite to board meetings and who gave it done until the pandemic. And in doing the post-analysis, the one thing that came out of the pandemic that nobody ever paid attention to or looked at as a factor in anything was, what does it cost to rent a shipping container to ship your stuff from Asia to the US or from US to anywhere? But when less ships were going during the pandemic, so to get on a ship, it cost you more money. Certain products were not going to make the ship because high-end computer chips would make the ship, not empty paint cans. So I remember I stumbled on this piece of data when, as all of us, I decided to do some redecorating when I was stuck in my house. And I went to the store to get those little quart cans of paint so my wife could look at 5 different things on the wall. And they said, we have to sell you gallons. There are no quart cans. So I went to their competitor. No one had a quart can. And now I figured out why. So what else wasn't making the ships? Where else would the supply chain break down? So now AI can look at any anomalies in manufacturing, retail, source, through the whole supply chain, and accurately to the dollar predict day and date when changes will happen to markets around the world. How many marketers today are basing their marketing decisions on real-time supply chain data? I'm willing to bet no one in your audience. But I do know the companies that are doing that, because why market something that's going to be sold out by the time your marketing hits, or that won't hit the date when your marketing hits? And I've seen that misalignment happen from giant companies, where greatest campaign, if it's not on the shelves, and now you need to bake that in so much earlier. And what in the unboxing for product X could defray the cost of that delivery by putting just one flyer in there for some other company that wants to reach that same audience, because you can guarantee that box will hit certain zip codes on a certain date. So the same way that magazines, when they were still existing, figured out how to do regional ads in their printing, you can now do that with physical product in your supply chain. And your mechanized warehouses are already doing this at the big scale. But AI lets the little person do this and optimize on things that usually were outside of the focus of, we've now finished this product, you figure out how to market it. Those days are gone.
So where does AGI fit into this? Artificial general intelligence is as big of a game changer as I don't know, like as the Industrial Revolution. So what's that going to shake out to be like for our listener?
So that could be 5 years from now. That could be 30 years from now. So this isn't, we're going to get a headline tomorrow. Now, the way that I've spent my career predicting the future, I do not have tarot cards or crystal ball. The best way to predict the future is to hang out with those that are coding it. So my clients are the big giant tech companies that will own this space because they have the deepest wallet. Somebody else may come up with it, but they'll buy it. Google didn't get to be Google because they invented everything. Apple didn't invent everything. Microsoft, you buy the leaders in the space. So Quantum computing will probably come before AGI, and quantum also changes everything in scary ways. But I wouldn't worry about AGI right now, because when it comes, it's a winner-take-all market.
So what does that mean, a winner-take-all market? Like, is that going to shut down the entire economy or put it all in the hands of one company or what?
It'll control whatever parts of the economy it wants to control. There'll be no competing with it. Quantum's the same way. So if a rogue nation state, you pick your own, who you think's bad or good, gets quantum first and wants to just be evil, like Dr. Evil, there's no more passwords or encryption that work. Things that would have taken a century to de-encrypt will be a second. So there's no more stock exchange, there's no more electrical grid, there's no more money in any bank accounts. It all disappears. There's no more internet, there's no more phone. They can shut down any country, shut down every car. I mean, there are groups that I work with in government that are focused on the day after that happens and trying contingency plans. So quantum is a huge disruptor. On the positive of AI that we're not talking about is most of the diseases that aren't self-inflicted, AI can cure. And that's amazing. Specialized drugs that we could have never figured out the combinations, the molecular structures. And those are happening every day. Detecting diseases decades before when you have a chance to modify your life. It's one thing to say, cut down on eating, whatever, you're going to get a heart attack. It's another saying, you will have a heart attack on June, 2027. You only have this many months to save your life. So we're getting into that type of data-rich world. And then robotics being the other combination, these things that seniors can live independently longer. I mean, the number of things that you can now have assistance on, self-driving cars, I have one, are great, but they're even better for somebody that's blind. So there's a yin and a yang. The difference is we're living in an era of endless innovation where things are changing at faster than Darwinian rates. We are not designed as a meat puppet to adapt to this much change. So what you have to focus on is what can you get ahead of and focus on that no one else is, and be the best in the world of that one thing. And because you're a click away from 8 billion people, you can create, dynastic wealth in a very short period of time. And people haven't paid attention, but this is what Silicon Valley's been doing for 40 years. They're not funding innovation. They're funding the next monopoly. Because if they fund something and gets far enough ahead, it owns the market. In the old days, you have a Coke and a Pepsi and a Ford and GM. Who's Google's competitor? Who's Apple's competitor? They're each end up with their, they get so big they get in each other's lanes at some point. But that's where AGI will make someone, king.
Yeah. It's an exciting, slightly terrifying time to be alive.
Well, it's not boring.
Yes. What's the old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
Yep. And I still am amazed that there are people probably listening to your show in their 20s that will see gaps that no one else is seeing and be able to, within a year, create $1 billion company. It still happens all the time. It's still very possible. And most of them are not focused on the marketing aspect. So the other thing is, how do you find that client that can't pay you, that you'd rather take equity than just get some consulting fee for a few $1,000s?
All right. So is there a process that you recommend or teach on how to innovate and come up with those kinds of gaps and opportunities in the market that no one else is seeing?
Yeah. So I have a process that I call, I wish I had a clever name, but it's 3 ideas a day for 30 days. So today, not tomorrow, write down 3 problems in your life. Traffic, whatever you want to do. But you have to do that every day for a month. First day is easy. We all have problems. By day 3, most people have run out of problems because they've accepted the way life is. Most of what we do from when we wake up till we go to sleep is autopilot. We're really not thinking outside of our routine. So if you have to know that you have to identify a problem when something is an inconvenience. So a buddy of mine was taking his medicine one morning. The phone rang, got off the phone. And it's like, did I take my pill? If I took it and I take another one, that's not good. If I didn't, that's even worse. So he came up with a thing called timer cap. Takes a little 25-cent watch, you open the cap, it starts ticking. Oh, I opened it 8 hours ago. Oh, I opened it 3 minutes ago. Then you can add Bluetooth to that so your family knows that you took your medicine, or your doctor can restrict when you can open for opioids or whatever. Huge company. One problem that no one else was focused on. And that's the other thing that most people don't understand that I talked about in Disrupt You is you don't have to be the one that invents, the flux capacitor, the printing press. We all hear of these things that just came out of left field. You can just look at something that's being used over here and use it somewhere else. Market your failed product to a different audience. And we use thousands of failed products every day that were just pivoted.
So what would you recommend as a next action for our listener besides that 30-day process, which is brilliant? I'm going to suggest our listener, every listener should do that process. But what would be some, just immediate next actions that they might implement?
On that point, and again, I have nothing to sell anybody. You don't write books to make money. You write books to help the world. On my website, jaysamit.com, I have workbooks that you can download for free to help you through this process, to get you stage by stage to thinking this way. And I partner with HP to get them to every Boys and Girls Club in America to show high school kids that aren't going to college that there's a choice between prison and would you like fries with that. What I would really recommend is start with the simplest thing. It's January. What do you absolutely want to achieve in the next 12 months? Now work backwards. You don't have to know all the steps, but if you want to be a doctor, you probably have to go to med school. And if you want to get into med school, you probably have to get good grades. You can work backwards and then who are the people that have the knowledge that will help you leapfrog along that line? How do you start engaging with them on their social media feeds and interacting? Don't go out of the blue, will you be my mentor? Because the answer is as effective as going to bar and saying, will you sleep with me? It's not how life works. You have to build a relationship. And you'll now have a roadmap of how to optimize your next 12 months. And I will tell you, if you live that type of focused life, you'll get much greater results. And if you're afraid to start, let me just leave you with this thought. Go talk to your grandparents, go to senior center, and ask old people what they regret. And not one of them will tell you something that they did and failed at. They'll tell you something that they didn't have the guts to try. So live 2025 with no regrets. You will fail. But when you fail, you either, when you try something, you either earn or you learn. But either way, you're better off than you started. So if you understand that it's not going to be a smooth road, that you're going to keep on getting smarter, and that's where those insights that we talked about, the very first sentence of this podcast. By trying something that no one else tried and going deeper into the woods, you're going to get insights that no other company had because they didn't go down that path. And that's where the big $1 billion idea comes from. We all start with the same, general ideas, but we don't work on them. Or we say, well, if it was that easy, somebody else would have done it. And, my books are filled with stories of the simplest things. I'll leave you with one that I find unbelievably inspiring. When you were in school, did you have a science fair where you had to do a project? Yep. I am the prototypical baking soda and vinegar volcano, okay? It's like, I got to do something, making something explode that sounds cool. So there was a young woman, a girl in high school in the States, and her parents aren't scientists. They're not anything. They're just mom and pop. And she's doing her science fair, and she learned somewhere that the fourth leading cause of death in the U.S. is hospitals. Not what you went in for, but the infection. She said, why don't they make suture stitches that change color if the wound's infected? She starts playing with vegetables in her fridge and pH balances, smart enough to have watched Shark Tank or read my books or whatever to go and get a patent. And that patent now saves hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives a year. She's going into college now, wealthy, but so inspired not to, how do I just take a class to get a grade and party? She already knows she can change the world. What will she do with the next 40, 50 years of her life? What a failure I feel like. I mean, like, that's what you should be looking for. We're here to heal the world. We're here to solve a problem. We're here to make a positive difference. And the tools are there.
That's a great story. It's like I don't know, it feels like a positive conspiracy or some sort of like miraculous turn of events.
But if you look at it the other way, there was nobody's job at the suture factory to make a different suture. It's how do we make them cheaper, whatever. How do we get our sales guys to get us in front of more hospitals? No one was looking at changing the product. And that's what I'm trying to say here. And I conclude future-proofing you with a whole chapter on the state of our planet. Okay? It used to be, eco-friendly was a marketing tagline. It wasn't really solving anything. But that has changed because being environmentally positive actually translates to the bottom line. So Walmart, not your leftist hippy-dippy company, realized after employees, their second biggest cost was energy. So they got rid of all the fluorescent lights that did everything, and they cut their energy use like crazy. Target, their competitor, goes, whoa, we're going to look like idiots. So now Target, with their big giant roofs, is the largest private company of solar panels, all right? They're grid-free. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And your customers, especially Gen Z and beyond, they don't want to buy wasteful stuff, right? They don't want to support any corporation that's antithetical to their values. So for marketers, what a great area to really be known for and to make a difference in. So if I was starting over, I'd be in marketing.
That's awesome. Okay, last question. Anything that pops into your mind that would be like an incredible miracle in your life? Doesn't have to be related to business or career. It could be something personal, but anything that you're willing to share with our listener about a miraculous turn of events for you?
I mean, that I think is possible, or just you want miracles? I mean,
no, that happened. That happened to you.
Oh, this happened to me.
Life.
Oh,
yeah.
My entire existence is a miracle. I'm dyslexic. I was written off as a small child as, go sit in the corner and play with Play-Doh. You're not going to amount to anything. And it turns out 1 out of 3 Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic. Richard Branson, the list goes on and on because we think different. Turned out to be a strategic advantage and a superpower. But I've been blessed to have the luck of bumping into so many people that have propelled me forward. I mean, one of the criticisms somebody wrote about my book is because I've worked with, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman and Richard Branson and all these people. Oh, it's easy for you. You know all these people. No, my dad made sandwiches. Okay. I was a middle-class kid, but I put my ideas out there. And, it doesn't qualify as miracle. That's a heavy thing. But, on bucket list items I never thought would happen is I minored in speech writing in college. I wanted to learn how to communicate. And I studied presidential speeches like crazy. I know it's boring for most people, but my fantasy was, wouldn't it be great to write a speech for the president? And one day I'm sitting at my desk and nobody at a startup company that I started. I'm in my 30s. I've got maybe 20 employees. And my assistant says, the president's on the line. I go, the president of what? And I pick up the phone and there's somebody doing this really bad Arkansas accent. And I made the president of the United States prove to me that he was the president of the United States, because why would the president have been calling? But he had read a column that I wrote and wanted to do a speech on that topic. And he said, 1 hour. I go, what, a 1 hour speech? He goes, no, I needed a 1 hour. And knock it off the bucket list. I got to write a thing for Bill Clinton. It was, out of body. And I can tell you 1,000 of those.
Wow.
But if you put yourself out there, you make your own luck, because no one could have as much luck as I've had in one life. Now, I failed more than anybody listening because I've had taken more shots. But the ones that hit have been unbelievable. And so if a moron like me can do it, and if you would have told me growing up as that poor kid that dozens of friends have become billionaires, I'd never met a millionaire. I didn't understand how anybody could have that kind of wealth. And some of these people are some of the smartest people on the planet. Some of them, so that's the miracle, is that you can make and become anything. And I speak at high schools and colleges to really motivate people to truly believe that. Vin Clancy had nothing going for him to tell him that he could become a self-made millionaire. So to get him, I had to switch him to a positive mindset instantly. Now, how do you do that? And I'll tell you, you lie. And there's a psychological phenomenon called the Pygmalion effect. A professor went to school, tested all the elementary school kids, and told the teacher 6 kids would be super learners, super achievers this year. And at the end of the year, those 6 kids outperformed everybody. It was unbelievable. Except the professor lied. He tested everybody, but didn't look at the test results, picked 6 names out of a hat. But if you tell people they're special and you treat them special, they become special. So I told Vin in our first meeting that I interviewed 200 candidates, and he was the only one that had all the attributes to be a self-made millionaire. He didn't believe it, but he saw somebody older and successful and said, I'll go along with this, lunatic. And when in his first month, he said he was making $70,000, he could have flown to the moon without a spaceship. Anybody listening to my voice, I believe you. I believe you can do it. I believe you can make the world a better place.
And if not now, then when? And if not you, then who?
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. All right. So if our listener wants to get either or both of your books, if they want to learn from you and more in-depth ways, I know you don't have a course or anything, but where should they go to learn more from you?
My books are on Amazon or wherever you want to get them. I have a website, jaysamit.com. TED Talk, tons of videos. I'm old. There's a large body of stuff out there. But I wrote the books for the sole purpose of helping you on your journey. And that's what makes all of this adventure gratifying to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jay. And thank you, listener. Make it a better world, and we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.